over here at Nyth. Today I'm gonna cover another one of my tiny house appliances, my range. As you probably know, I love to cook, so I use this thing all of the time. And with one exception, which I'll explain in a minute, I absolutely love this little range. It's about 20 inches, it is 20 inches deep so that it fits in small spaces pretty well. It is propane, which works out well for my off-grid setup. And it's big enough that I can do almost everything I want on it. The only time I wish it was a little bigger is when I'm trying to do several large kettles at the same time. The burners are a little close. You can't do like 3 big kettles all at once, but that's something most people don't do, so probably won't be a problem for you. But you can get quite a few fairly big kettles on there. A lot of people aren't trying to can 20-something quarts of spaghetti sauce at a time, which is something I do. It's easy to light, it's easy to clean. These little racks come off just like that, so you can wipe anything that's splattered or spilled onto there. And it does have a little clock and timer built in. And the oven is spacious. There's 2 oven racks. They're completely adjustable. And it fits things like a full 9x13 pan. The other thing is, depending on the handle design on your 9x13, you can't go sideways, you do have to go long ways. It fits regular full-size cookie sheets. If you remove the one rack, I can get my big roast pan in there that I do things like turkeys in, that'll hold a 20-pound turkey. So the oven is pretty spacious. I'm really happy with that part. It's got one of these little drawers down below, a broiler drawer, which is just not something I ever use, but some people do. And the biggest thing I learned, oh, and there is a hood vent up above it for propane. It's got a little light and a fan. And the biggest thing I learned when I moved into my tiny house is if you are off-grid and you have propane appliances, they do not necessarily operate without electricity. Now, I was a little naive and I was not aware of this. When I moved into my tiny house, I thought if I had a propane oven, or there were several other things like a propane heater, etc., I thought all I needed was a full propane tank. I did not realize they required the vast majority of propane appliances I've learned require some electricity. Now, to run the stovetop, there is no electricity required. You just, click the burner. It doesn't have a pilot light. It's got a little click igniter, and you can turn the burner up or down or off. Now, that will work just fine with no power. The oven, on the other hand, has actually been a giant pain in this regard. I love the oven, everything bakes beautifully, but this was all things I learned. There is different ways of igniting a propane oven. The vast majority of propane stoves nowadays are made with a glow bar ignition. So if you picture what an electric oven looks like when you can see the coils or whatever glowing bright red, it's got a little piece like that in there, and that's what ignites the propane. So it does burn propane to do the heating, but to ignite the propane, it's using that electric glow bar. The other option, and there's not a whole lot of them, is to have a spark igniter. You need a little battery still because it does require some electricity, but it clicks kind of like the burner, makes a spark and ignites it. Now, I think the reason that most ovens go with the glow bar now is that I believe it's supposed to be a little bit safer because that bar is glowing all the time, and so any propane that is feeding is going to be ignited. You're not going to get some kind of buildup and then an explosion, which is always a potential problem you do want to be aware of with propane. Now, the downside to that is that electric glow bar draws a significant amount of power. I have a small solar setup. It works for everything I do, but this oven, which is I thought was just going to need propane, just about does in my solar system. When that glow bar is lit, it's drawing about 500 watts of electricity. That is similar to running a small microwave. That's a fairly significant power use. If you are attached to grid power, you're probably not going to notice it, though it's certainly going to up your power bill. But if you're on a small or limited power setup of any kind, being off-grid, that is huge. Especially if you bake things for hours, which is often how an oven is used. Now, I at some point might actually switch this out. This is made by Brown Stoveworks. I'll put a link down below to this exact model, and I'll probably put a link down below to the almost identical model. That's the one I wish I had instead, where everything is pretty much the same except that the oven has the spark igniter. It also does mean it doesn't have this clock and timer, but I can, you know, that's handy, but I can certainly live without that. If I had that, I think it's a little group 3 or 5 or something, AA batteries would ignite that oven, and then eventually you have to replace the batteries, of course, but it would not draw that many watts of power when the oven is on. As I said, for my setup, that is a big enough power draw to make me think about swapping out my oven, especially if I knew somebody who was going to be on grid and would prefer this exact oven. I would absolutely sell it and buy this, basically this exact oven, except with the different igniter, because it would work so much better for my setup. So whether you are going to be off-grid or not, this may not make a difference, but if you are, or if you're going to have any kind of limited power availability, learn from my mistakes and realize that a lot of propane appliances do require electricity, sometimes very significant amounts of electricity, and so research the exact details on that before buying one. Again, those are probably the things some of you guys were aware of, but probably some of you were not. I certainly was not, and so I've learned this the hard way. Now, I've made it 3 years dealing with this, but it is enough of a pain that it is something I still think about switching out. This is actually a nicer, more expensive stove model than the spark igniter one. I think this one was about $900, and the one I want and would prefer is only about $500. So I may do that at some point. This is here right now, so I haven't changed it, but just one of those big things, not just for ranges and ovens, but all kinds of propane appliances. Double check if your power is going to be limited, what kind of electricity they do require. But other than that one huge caveat, I love everything about this little range. It does a phenomenal job. I cook on here all the time, and if you're looking for a little 20-inch stove, after 3 years of use, I would absolutely highly recommend Brown Stoveworks. From my experience, they do make a phenomenal product, and so in a tiny house situation, this works really well. Hopefully that info helps you guys out if you're looking for appliances for a tiny house, a small house, off-grid, whatever else. Thanks for watching, folks. If you're interested in more info on my off-grid tiny house life, check out some of my other videos here. And if you like what you're seeing, click the little picture of my house to subscribe and then hit the little bell so YouTube actually notifies you every time there's a new video available. See y'all next time.